Last winter, I was living alone in a small, quiet house on the edge of a neighborhood that faded directly into undeveloped forest. Beyond my backyard were only trees, snow, and darkness. I had lived there for about a year without any problems, and I liked the isolation. The house was old, but it felt warm and familiar. That weekend, a brutal cold wave settled in. Snow fell on and off, and the temperature dropped well below zero, keeping me indoors for days. On the night everything happened, I follow my usual routine. Dinner cleaning, a little television, and then bed around 11. Nothing unusual stood out at first. There was one detail I had ignored for months. The lock on my bedroom door was broken. It was a push lock that no longer held. The door would click open from either side. I never fixed it because I lived alone. And as long as the front and back doors were locked, it didn't seem important that assumption would haunt me. Sometime in the night, I woke suddenly, my heart racing for no clear reason. The house was silent and pitch black, but my eyes adjusted just enough to see my bedroom door. Slightly open, I tried to stay calm. Old houses shift, cold air moves walls. That was the explanation I clung to. I got out of bed quietly, didn't turn on any lights, and closed the door, making sure it latched when I returned to bed. Something felt wrong. A deep instinct told me not to relax. I lay there staring into the darkness, listening to the silence stretch endlessly. Nearly 30 minutes passed before I heard it. A soft shuffle on floorboards somewhere outside my room. I sat up, holding my breath. The sound stopped. I waited frozen, afraid that moving would somehow alert whatever made the noise. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me back into sleep. When I woke again, my heart was pounding even harder. The door was open again. This time, the explanation didn't work. I knew I had closed it properly. As I swung my legs out of bed, something shifted behind the dew. I didn't stay in that house after that night. I spent several days at a friend's place while the police continued their investigation. They never found a suspect, and eventually stopped updating me altogether. When the snow began to melt, I returned one final time to collect my belongings. That's when I noticed something far worse than a broken lock or an open door in the woods behind my house. Faint trails cut through the snow and dead leaves. These weren't animal paths. They were uneven, trampled lines made by repeated human footsteps. The trail led straight from deep within the forest to the back of my house. Whoever had been watching me wasn't new. They had been there long enough to carve a path, simply by walking it again and again. I followed it carefully and discovered another horrifying detail. One of the back windows didn't lock properly. The latch was loose, just like my bedroom door. That meant the man didn't just enter that night. There's a real chance he'd been inside my home before, quietly learning my routine. Learning me, I moved far away after that. I still think about whether he followed me or not. The incident happened months ago, but it still feels fresh, and that wasn't the only time I experienced something like this. On Halloween, another nightmare unfolded. This time in a place that felt even more abandoned. I lived in an old apartment building. On the outskirts of town, it wasn't dangerous. Just forgotten most tenants had moved out, leaving entire floors empty. Over time, it became clear that I was likely the only person still living there. The silence was overwhelming. I once ran my dryer before work and could hear it echo through all 3 floors of the building. That's how empty it was on Halloween night. After returning from work, I sat down to relax, when loud knocking shattered the silence. 3 hard knocks echoed through the unit. When I opened the door, a child stood there wearing a Halloween costume. Holding an empty bag, she didn't. I stood frozen inside my apartment, staring at the door as the knocking continued. I asked who was there, but there was no response. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a man dressed entirely in black, a hood pulled low over his face. He stood too close to the door, like he was ready to force it open. The moment I turned the handle, my instincts screamed at me not to open it. Then I heard something worse. More footsteps in the hallway, whispering, low voices muffled by walls. There wasn't just one person anymore. I dialed 911 and searched desperately for a place to hide. The apartment was tiny, leaving me with only one option. The balcony, I slipped outside and hid behind the blinds. As quietly as I could, minutes later, I heard the sound of my door being forced open. Light spilled into the apartment as two men entered and began searching the rooms. My heart pounded so hard I thought they would hear it. They moved slowly, methodically, even stepping close to the balcony blinds. Somehow they didn't see me. After what felt like an eternity, they left. The police arrived shortly after. They confirmed I was the only legal resident in the building. No one else should have been there. The most unsettling theory was that the child had been used as bait, a way to make me comfortable opening the door. I moved out within days. No arrests were ever made. Months later, I took a night shift job at a small shipping warehouse outside town. It was a long concrete building with rows of shelving and a tiny office. During slow season, I worked completely alone from midnight to 6. Most nights were quiet, almost peaceful. But one night the silence felt heavy. I was wearing earbuds when I heard footsteps near the office light slow. Deliberate, I removed the earbuds and listened nothing. Minutes later, the footsteps returned. I called out my boss's name, but there was no answer. I searched the office and break room empty. Later, while working in the office, I glanced up and saw the moment the metal tool struck the door frame. Beside my head, everything inside me snapped into survival mode. The sound was deafening, a violent, metallic crack that echoed through the entire warehouse, like a gunshot for a split second. My ears rang and my vision blurred. If it had hit me even slightly, I don't think I would have walked away from that building alive. The man didn't shout, didn't react, didn't even speed up. He just stood there after throwing it, staring at me with that same empty, unblinking expression. As if violence was the most normal thing in the world. To him, I slammed the door shut with all my strength and threw my body against it, fumbling for the handle and locking mechanism. My hands were shaking so badly. I nearly dropped the phone as I dialed 911. I backed into the corner of the office, keeping my eyes fixed on the door, fully expecting it to burst open at any moment. Every second felt stretched, distorted. The warehouse, once familiar, now felt like a trap, endless aisles, blind corners and dark spaces, where someone could disappear without a sound. From behind a closed door, I couldn't hear footsteps anymore. That silence was worse than the noise. I didn't know if he was gone or standing just inches away. Listening to my breathing, the dispatcher stayed on the line, telling me to stay put, but my mind kept racing through worst-case scenarios. I imagined the man circling around, finding another way and waiting. Until I relaxed, I realized how exposed I really was. No co-workers, no security. No cameras watching the aisles. Just me and a building full of shadows. When the police finally arrived, they searched the warehouse thoroughly. Every aisle, every side room, every office, they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken doors. No explanation for how that man got inside, or where he went. The officers suggested he might have slipped out before they arrived. But none of it sat right with me. I had checked the building earlier. Looking back, all three experiences share the same unsettling pattern. Each time I was alone, each place felt forgotten, overlooked or quiet enough that no one would notice if something went wrong. A house near the woods, an abandoned apartment building, a warehouse after midnight. These weren't random locations. They were environments where someone could observe, wait, and test boundaries without being interrupted. The broken locks were never just coincidences. The bedroom door that wouldn't latch, the back window that didn't lock properly, the old apartment keypad that suddenly came back to life. Each flaw created opportunity. I used to think small things like that didn't matter, especially when nothing bad had happened. Yet I was wrong. Silence doesn't mean safety. Familiarity doesn't mean control. And being alone doesn't mean you're unobserved. What still unsettles me most isn't what happened, but what didn't. I never found out who those people were or what they wanted, no. It is no explanations, just silence after the fact. Like the world moved on, while I was left carrying the weight of it. Sometimes I wonder how many times I was watched without knowing it, how many nights someone stood just outside, or just inside waiting for the right moment. I moved, I changed jobs. I became obsessive about locks, lights, and listening to my instincts. That feeling in your gut, the one you try to rationalize away, isn't paranoia. It's awareness. Every time I ignored it, things escalated. Every time I listened, I survived. I'm sharing this not to scare people, but to warn them, fix the locks. Don't dismiss strange behavior. Don't assume silence means safety, and never underestimate how patient someone can be. When they think no one is paying attention, I was lucky. Others might not be, and that's the part that still keeps me awake at night.